Coming back to the first purpose of the heart, the vortexing, gets me thinking about structuring water outside the body before we drink it. And there's a number of different devices. There's devices that spin water and create a vortex. There's wands you can use in your water. There's all kinds of different devices. So, given the importance of structured water, and you've talked about getting sun and grounding, ways we can enhance the water already in our body, what about water we're going to ingest and using some of these modalities beforehand? Any value there?
Definitely. So, in Dr. Pollack's lab, he's shown that the toxin, the herbicide glyphosate, directly interferes with structured water formation. So, having clean water, and I imagine that's not the only toxin that would do that. It's just the one that he's tested. So having toxin-free water is very, very important. So getting rid of the toxins in your water, adding minerals to it, because the hydrated ions of minerals, they're hydrated, they're kind of the structured water formed around those minerals. So adding minerals back to the water, and then yes, you can treat it in some way, so to speak, or energize it, I would say, because I would argue that you can't really drink structured water because it would technically be in a gel state if it was structured water. So you can't really drink it. It'd be like trying to drink Jello. But you can energize the water. So then when it gets next to a biological surface, it, yes, more readily structures itself. And so yes, you can vortex it with these different devices that will do that. The most low-tech way to do it is get like a little a wine glass and just swirl it around. If that's all you can do, it's better than nothing. You could put it in the sun, put it in contact with the earth. I know some people have like these little PEMF pads that mimic the electromagnetic field of the earth or something similar, and they put it on that. There's ways that you can create energy or coherence to the water so that it's more likely to structure itself when it gets in use. So I think that is worth doing that. But also remember that if you don't have devices that will do that, there's low-tech ways to do it. You can put it in the sun, or you can drink clean, mineral-rich water and then put your body in the environment that helps structure the water. Because I think that hydration for the vascular system, like drinking water for hydration is important for the vascular system. But full body hydration, I think, is more about metabolic health, because mitochondrial function or optimal mitochondrial function, you're creating metabolic water in the cells. So if you have poor mitochondrial function, you're dehydrating your cells. But I think for the vascular system, drinking water is important for maintaining hydration in the vascular and lymphatic systems and things like that. Yeah.
You mentioned PEMF mats. Using one of those or one of these mats that you can plug into your outlet and it connects to the grounding part of the outlet, how do those compare from your research to going outside and actually putting our feet on the grass?
Yeah, nothing's going to be as good as going out onto the earth and putting your feet directly on the earth as far as like conducting electrons from the earth. And a PEMF mat is just different frequencies that are trying to mimic or be more compatible with the electromagnetic field of the earth, the Schumann resonance. So both of those things, you're in contact with both of those things. We're in contact with it right now, even though my feet aren't on the earth. I'm in contact. I'm in that field, but I'm closer to that field if I'm on the earth. And I'm in direct contact with it, conducting electrons if I'm in contact with it. My feet are on a grounding mat right now, because when I am indoors and I can be grounded, I try to be. So I have grounding sheets, grounding mats. I don't know that anybody's ever looked at compared to like how much I'm conducting, with feet on the earth versus a grounding mat. And I'm sure it would be different for different homes. But yes, they definitely work. Lots of the studies on grounding were done with grounding mats inside, and they saw physiological effects of reduction in inflammation and blood flow and increased zeta potential on red blood cells with those mats. So, but I always default to the original way it was done. I think that's always going to be best.
And for somebody that wants to go stand in the grass or use one of these mats if they're on their computer, anything we need to be aware of when it comes to, say, underground wiring or being close to certain structures that are emitting electricity into the ground? Basically, what do you look for when you're grounding to make sure that ground is safe and health promoting?
Yeah, so I wouldn't, if you knew, I wouldn't necessarily ground on an area where there's big power lines underneath you. I don't know that would be necessarily less harmful or more harmful, I mean. But it doesn't seem like it would be, like it's interfering with some conduction. But I have heard some theories that being grounded actually protects you from electromagnetic fields in some sense. You know, so yeah, definitely being in like submerged in natural water, that's very protective against. You're very grounded in that state, and that's protecting you from EMF. But yeah, but then there is things like dirty electricity. So dirty electricity is basically this crazy EMF field, and all these different electricities coming from all these different places can kind of find its way into the wires in your home. And since there's AC current in the home, it's kind of this pulsating thing. And so if you're worried about that, you can buy dirty electricity filters that you can plug into the wall that kind of eliminate that dirty electricity, cut off the circuit, so that when you plug in the grounding prong, you're not worried about getting any of that through that wire, because the grounding prong is not wired to any electricity. It's just going to the ground. But it's a wire that's conductive, so it can absorb some dirty electricity if it's around. So if you want to avoid that, you can get those filters. But like, my home, I've had it tested by a building biologist, and they said dirty electricity wasn't that big of a deal. So I don't worry about it too much, like right now with the grounding mat that I'm using. But when I sleep at night, I turn off electricity to the bedroom altogether, and then the grounding sheets are plugged into the wall. So I'm not worried about it at all at that point. But yeah, there are concerns sometimes, especially older homes, I'd say, that may have some, poor wiring, or areas like in cities where there's lots of EMF and different electricity everywhere. Those can be concerns. But yeah.
All right, so going over the areas where you're grounding: bed sheet, at your computer. Right now your feet are grounded. Do you have any other grounding mats throughout the house?
No, I just have one, and it kind of follows me around the house. And then I go outside as often as I can. But that's the other thing too, is like, on grass or dirt, you're very grounded. But also if you have like a concrete patio that's maybe 4 or 5 inches or less, and it's directly on the earth, you're conducting through that somewhat. I have a little grounding tester that I can test if my circuit is complete, right, with the earth. But also the leaves of a tree, you can touch the leaves of a tree and you're grounded. Patio stones, those types of things, the beach, the sand. Places that are not grounded are asphalt, mulch, dead wood, not very grounded, not conductive, places like that. So yeah, but as much time as you can spend feet on the earth, it's a good thing.
All right, so number one is getting your feet right on the earth. If somebody wants to be more prescriptive with this, how much grounding is ideal? It sounds like you're doing quite a bit with your hacks indoors. But now that we're moving into the practical, how much would you say is a good amount to aim for per day?
It's hard to say. I don't know that anybody's really measured. Well, I do know like of self experiments where people will look at their live blood analysis, and they'll like look at it beforehand, and their red blood cells are clumped together. They see this rouleau formation on there, and then they'll go out and do 30 minutes of grounding, and the red blood cells are perfectly evenly spaced after that. And then about, I'd say, an hour after grounding, when they've stopped grounding, they're back to being fairly not as bad as they were to begin with, but they're pretty clumped together. Now, that's just the end of one experiment, and I also don't know much about that person's, like, what environment they went back into after they grounded. I don't know if there's like a high EMF environment or whatever it was. But so that gives people a sense of like how long that's going to last. You got about an hour if you spend 30 minutes grounding to where it's going to go back to a more coagulative state, so to speak, which is why the indoor grounding tools are useful, because I can be grounded as much as possible. Even if it's less of a conduction than outside, it's still something. And grounding sheets are very useful because I can be grounded all night long. So yeah, and then minimizing your exposure to things that have been shown to steal the charge, break down structured water. So wireless routers have been shown to do that. Artificial light is very confusing. We want the infrared light. That's very building the structured water. So I have incandescent bulbs in the house. If I am using light bulbs, I try and be outside. I have red light panels, infrared sauna. Like, I try and boost my infrared exposure so I don't have to live outside, necessarily, but I spend my time outside as much as I can. But yeah, it's doing those types of things.
When it comes to infrared saunas, I know there's near infrared and far infrared. I personally have a far infrared at home. From reading your book, I know that sweet spot for creating structured water is 3000 nanometers. Is that part of the far infrared spectrum?
Yeah, it's far infrared. Yeah, so that's the farthest wavelength of infrared that would come naturally, right? So that's what they tested in Dr. Pollock's lab, that farthest wavelength. Um, and so it's basically the spectrum of electromagnetic light. So you have infrared through UV. That's the only light that we're ever supposed to get from the sun. All this other artificial light, whether it's wireless signals or the blue light, whatever, it's either processed light or it's outside that spectrum. And so UV also makes structured water, but it was the least efficient. And then the far other side of the spectrum, the far infrared, was the most efficient at building the structured water. So that's why I have a far infrared sauna. And the sauna I use, it's been tested, and it's as far as I know, which I don't know everything about every sauna, but as far as I know, it emits the most far infrared light of any far infrared sauna out there. It's the one I use to reverse the plaque in my leg, or the one I use while reversing the plaque in my leg. So yeah, technically I would think far infrared is the best for building structured water, but near infrared will do it. Red light will do it. All the wavelengths of light will do it, aside from processed blue. Like, so, there's this discussion to have. People will tell me all the time, like, well, if processed light is bad, then a far infrared sauna is processed light. It's one wavelength. It's always supposed to be balanced with all the colors and wavelengths. And I was like, you're exactly right. And if I was to overuse that processed light, then I think it would be harmful. If we had chosen red light or infrared light, which it's not visible, so we couldn't light our homes with infrared light. But if we had chosen red light to light our homes, I think we'd all be talking about the harms of red light at this point, but it didn't make sense because red light's not that bright and didn't really make sense to do that. So we're talking about the harms of processed blue light and light that is very high in blue, because like you can look at, there'd be a threshold, like, and you do like the red light laser therapies for like treatment of scar tissue and things like that in your body. Like it's like beneficial, it gets to a certain point and then it's negative. So if we overdid this, I think it would be harmful. But the reason it's seen as a therapy, these red light panels, near infrared, far infrared, is because we're so deficient in infrared light, because technically we're supposed to be outside during the day, exposed to it all day long. Even if we're in the shade, we're getting infrared reflecting off the grass and stuff. And so we're just so deficient in it that it seems like a therapy. And I think an important therapy to use if you can't be out in the sun all day long. But I think that if you look at all the statistics and the trends in diseases, every disease gets worse in the winter. We have worse heart attacks, worse deaths from cancer. Every disease gets worse. And when you think about the fact that it's harder to get outside, there's people just get less sunlight in the winter, depending on where you live, then it makes sense. Like, we're getting less structured water, which plays a role in every chronic disease, and that's causing an issue when in the winter. Among other things, we also eat a bunch of processed food around the holidays and all this other stuff that we do, but that's one contributor. So yeah, that's the light story.
Okay, so far to build structured water, infrared light, grounding. What other areas do you try and hit on within a day?
Infrared light and grounding are the main ones we have removed ourselves from in our modern way of life. So those are the main ones to add back. But then, like I mentioned, there are things that tear down structured water. So we have the wireless signals. In Dr. Pollock's lab, a wireless router, just a normal wireless router, interfered with structured water formation, 15 to 20% reduction. So we're inundated with these signals these days, and you're never going to get rid of them all. But it's important to mitigate them when you can. Stay as far away from them. So like the closer it is to you, the more harmful it is. So keep it as far away from you as possible. Put the wireless router somewhere else in the house. Don't put your cell phone next to you. Like, don't use a bunch of wireless headphones and all that kind of stuff if you can avoid it. And then eliminate it when you can, like when you sleep. Like, you don't need it, turn it off. I sleep in an EMF blocking canopy that gets rid of all of it, all the cell towers and everything from around me. So yeah, you can go as far down that rabbit hole as you want. So that, and then I mentioned toxin exposure before. Those things, toxins have been shown. I mean, it makes sense. So anything that we think of that causes oxidative stress, something that's trying to steal an electron from somewhere because it wants to be paired with electrons, these free radicals, anything that can do that, well, guess what? A very robust amount of electrons is stored in structured water. So if you have this oxidative stress, a lot of these molecules like toxins or reactive oxygen species from damaged mitochondria, things like that, poor metabolic health, then you have a lot of these things that can potentially steal energy from structured water and break it down. So that's an issue. So anything like that. So, and like I said, it hasn't been directly tested, but I wouldn't be surprised if heavy metals and plastics and herbicides and pesticides and all these different things all steal the body's charge of structured water and break it down. So that's the other thing, is removing the things as much as you can that tear down structured water.
And the good news within this is a lot of the things you're talking about to build structured water and to protect against breaking our structured water are things that are part of what people in our world know as a healthy lifestyle. It's just looking at it from this other angle of why those things might be helpful, because they're acting on the water in our body.
Yeah. So if you take a big picture, right? This is ultimately what I've come to like discover or think, is that life is just, it's all about harvesting energy from the environment and using it to create order. So the universe abides by the laws of thermodynamics, which is energy is never created or destroyed. It's only passed between two things, and that things with concentrated energy tend toward disorder, entropy, right? And so what life is harvesting energy from the environment and temporarily defying the second law of thermodynamics, and maintaining order in a system, in an organized system, while that thing is alive. And then once we die, it dissipates again. The energy dissipates. But while we're alive, we want to maintain that order. And if you don't have enough energy in the system to maintain the order, you get disease. Things start to break down. And so the first place that seems to lose its order, or the body seems to sacrifice, is the lining of the arteries, which is why when we put ourselves in a situation that has deprived of our energy sources, infrared light, grounding, and then we've added these things that steal those energy sources, then the vascular system is what suffers the most. And that's why we have an epidemic of cardiovascular disease in this country, especially in America. But so we have to put our body back into a situation where it can harvest energy from the environment. People think that we get all of our energy from food, and that's absolutely false. There are scientists that estimate we should only get about a third of our energy from food, and the rest should come from our environment. And we have the ability to conduct electrons, which is what we're harvesting in the chemical bonds of food. We're trying to take the electrons from them and transport an electron transport chain and make ATP, which is not the energy currency of the cell, but it's very important anyways. That's a different conversation though. And so we're trying to get electrons from the environment, and you can conduct the electrons directly from the earth, but we also have DHA and melanin in our skin that takes sunlight and convert it directly to electrons. And these processes are there for a reason. And so if you live inside all day out of the sunlight, you're depriving your body of those electrons. So if you don't give your body energy, don't expect it to be able to maintain order. That's basically the big picture fundamental understanding of it.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch a full episode. I'll see you over there.
Life is just all about harvesting energy from the environment and using it to create order. And if you don't have enough energy in the system to maintain the order, you get disease. Things start to break down. And so the first place that the body seems to sacrifice is